Hey, welcome back to another episode of In the Driver's Seat with ABS. Today's guest is Tom, better known as Tedward. A few years back, Tom quit his corporate job to focus on his passion of automotive journalism. Since then, he's contributed to the Winding Road magazine and amassed a following of nearly 500,000 subscribers on his own YouTube channel, featuring reviews and POV drives of a wide variety of cars from classic Ferraris, Jaguars, and Mercedes to a few Porsches, Audis, Rolls-Royce, and even a Lexus LFA. It's safe to say chasing the dream has paid off. Thanks for tuning in, happy holidays, and we'll see you in the new year. Hey, so welcome back to another episode of In the Driver's Seat with ABS, or I would like to say ABS-T.
It's a good one, dude.
That was really terrible.
Yeah.
But welcome back for episode 38. If you haven't caught episode 37, we had the Crankshaft Boys on. Super grateful for them to come on the show. We have another Massachusetts resident today, Tedward.
Hey, guys.
Who has joined us on the show. He came down, so thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Always beautiful to be in any of the Audrain buildings. It's like there's no better setting for this kind of thing than walking in and seeing a bunch of classic cars. So
yeah, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. We enjoy it. I know we do.
Yeah, we just don't scooch back too hard because you'll hit a nice Alan Prost 1988 MP44. You know.
Yeah, I'm like, I genuinely didn't realize I was sitting in front of that. That's what I love about this building.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And we like to joke. Things in New England, right? Everyone seems so secretive, and then you hear stories of, guy from New England has a crazy YouTube channel, and I'm sure that it was difficult to break that like New England mindset of like, oh, like what's this kid making videos for a living? Like,
yeah, New England is all the way you relate to people, especially in Boston, is through adversity and through
anger
and through like bitterness. I feel like in most places in the world, you go somewhere and the way to make friends is to be like, oh, I had a great day. How was your day? Oh my God. Yeah. You too. Perfect. And everyone's just like, yeah, he's got really good energy.
I had to wait in line at Dunkies for 45 minutes. Are you fucking kidding me, guys?
This is exactly the thing. So if you grow up and if you act like things are good, everyone's like, oh, so you think you're better than me? You got this nice life. You're just hanging out and everything's good for you. Okay. All right, kid. Like,
tone it down. Okay.
His parents have money. And, whereas like if you go in and they're like, how's your day? You're like, oh, it's been pretty good, but oh man, I hit some real traffic.
Yeah.
And the big dig's killing me. This whole thing, right? And that's how you relate to people here. So to be a like Bostonian or a New Englander and relate to a greater population, you do have to learn to like be a little cheerier. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a hard thing to do. And I find myself doing that all the time when like, I'm like, no one wants to hear about like your crappy day.
But that's a thing here.
It's I feel like I'm the happy one around here.
Yeah. Well, you're not from New
I go
England,
into a room. People come, like, I go to, like, they're like, why are you so happy? I'm like, what do you mean?
I don't know. I'm having a good day.
It's like, what's the point of not being happy? We're around these cars all day.
Crazy.
We get to talk to people.
I remember
like Tom. How can we not be happy?
I know. I'm happy. Okay, I'm happy.
Tell me why you're happy, guy. Huh?
Well, besides the traffic. No, but I remember I went to school in Arizona, and I remember being there like in the first few weeks, and multiple people would bump into me in line and be like, oh, sorry. Well, so how's it going? It's like, why do you care? It's like, but it's a thing. And like, here we are in the car world, and the car world's much different, I think. And a lot of people, we were just talking about, with the Crankshaft Boys. I'm now junior cranker and
little cranker.
Yeah, little cranker. Yeah,
cranker. Yeah,
hog chick.
But like people in the car world seem to be really open and just wanting to meet people and talk about either their cars or what they're into.
It's a diverse scene, and I think like the car world here is so ingrained in day-to-day culture. Like my parents are car people, but they're not like car people. But I grew up with it. It was always just like I thought everyone had a hot rod in their garage that just didn't run. I thought everyone's dad. Right. So like I'd go, I was like 6 years old. You go to your friend's house and you're like, so where's the car in the garage? Like, and like, what are you talking about? Like my parents drive like a Camry and a Corolla, and you're like, yeah, but like, do you have like a big block vet or something? Like,
the one that doesn't run,
right? Like, what do you bring to the car show?
Yeah,
or like what's been tormenting you for your entire life that hasn't run that you've been lusting after, like riding in?
Yeah,
and they're like, oh no one cares. But like, I don't know. My parents were always car people. I think my uncles were like car people. My mother's brothers. And they, like my dad grew up like fixing old Triumphs and stuff. And just, I think it was just out of, that's what people did. Like it was very dazed and confused kind of vibes where you're just like, yeah, you just drive around town. And you
hang out.
That is
your thing, It's like, and everyone, all they have is stories. Like my Uncle Steve, all of his stories were just like running from cops and his road runners and stuff. And you're like, and this wasn't like hidden from us. This is like exactly what we would have talked about at like Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner when I was like 5 years old. And I'm like, yeah, you build a hot rod and you run from the cops.
That's awesome.
I had the opposite experience. I was like my parents could not be more non-car people. My brother, not a car person. He is now, but like I was like 8 years old, obsessing with cars, and like I thought it was weird how much I loved cars. So I kind of had like the opposite approach.
Do you have any pictures of yourself from this age?
Cameras were invented when I was young, so yes, I do.
That is true. I need to see
I'm not
young
that
Barry.
Old yet. But yes, I can
Barry.
find some. But I had a friend whose dad had like I don't remember what year, but it was probably like a 63, 64 Corvette convertible. And I would like, it was like one of those situations where I was like kind of friends with him, but I like always wanted to go to his house, to go see the car. So it was like worth the pain of like hanging out with him for a little bit to go like check out the car in the garage.
Still alive?
Oh yeah.
He's gonna hear this.
He's still annoying people to this day.
No, he was fine. He was, but I'm the weird one. Like, like people probably didn't want to be friends with me, so I had to like, force my way into going to see that car. But I still to this day remember, sitting in the passenger seat with him, the three of us, his dad driving, and I would just beg every time for his dad to take that car out. So it's funny.
Awesome.
It's funny that you have that story of that's what you grew up with, and I, the juxtaposition.
Oh baby.
What was like, do you have like a defining car moment from when you were younger, or is it just like a culmination of things?
I was thinking about this exact question on
Hell
the way
yeah.
here, and the answer is no, because it was just there. It was always there. It was never not there. Like the only thing I ever like thought about as a kid was cars, and so it was just like there are moments that are like that shaped me a little bit into what I ended up loving. Like I grew up in sort of like a middle class, middle America-y like Massachusetts area. So like I didn't have the rich uncle who had like the 930 turbo or Ferrari or anything. Like those were unobtainium. Those didn't exist unless they were sitting on my shelf as a model car. So the best you would see is maybe like a Corvette or like something like that, whatever. But growing up, then I was introduced to people like when I was 14 or 15, one of my dad's coworkers had a 95 BMW 540i M Sport. It's a 6-speed manual with a self-leveling rear suspension. It's the last of the E34s, and they did a run of like basically V8 M5s.
Nice.
And he was a psycho. This guy grew up in France and Italy, and he's the type who would without any worry of police, just drive 140 miles an hour, like everywhere. And so I would get in the car with him all the time.
Yeah,
I would like watch this, and this is like pre-Alex Roy on YouTube, all this stuff, and I'm like, oh my god. And then I started seeing like those videos start coming out where it was
Super
like Gumball
speeders.
3000 and all that kind of stuff, and I'm like, wow, there's actually a culture of people who do this. And he kind of taught me how to drive fast respectfully, because this is a topic we could go on forever about, but like, there are people who will look at anyone who drives 10 miles an hour over the speed limit and think you're a monster who's trying to kill our children. But then there's others where we're like, well, there's a time and a place, and 160 miles an hour here doesn't feel so risky.
Right.
And that's where I sit in that camp. But he taught me how to drive like that. And when I was 16, I got my permit, and he let me drive that car. And we ripped through Vermont. And he like, I'm like ripping through gears, and he's like, hey, just enjoy third. You don't need to shift. And I'm like, oh. And he like taught me how to just like fucking wind out a gear and like enjoy the corner and like, so that was one of the big defining moments of my like career, because I hadn't really thought of BMW in that way, because as far as I was concerned, like my neighbor across the street had BMWs, but he was just like an ordinary dude, like smart, great guy, but like he wasn't like an autocrosser. It was just, I know what the bassy rumble of that engine sounded like. And I never thought of them as sports cars. I thought of them as like dad cars. Like my dad had a Volvo wagon and he had a BMW. They both had hand crank sunroofs. As far as I was concerned, I'm like, same.
Mm-hmm. So is that BMW a car that will always be a car that you'll lust after?
It hits me every time, like, because it had the turbine 2 wheels, which is
Oh,
actually like a
beautiful.
cap
No
over the
shit.
thing.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
this
yeah.
Arctic silver with the black
Ooh,
interior,
yeah.
and he was a heavy smoker. So like every time I smell like, most people retch at this, but like if I smell like heavy cigarette, like unfiltered cigarette smoke in a leather interior, I'm like, oh, that smells
This
like
guy,
speed.
Yeah, it brings
this
me
guy's
back.
giving me Georgie vibes. You guys know Georgie with
No.
the E34 M5?
No.
Absolute legend. Look him
Oh,
up.
Georgie, he's rest in peace, Georgie.
Yeah, rest in peace.
Yeah,
He was one of my first YouTube, like, oh my God, I've never seen driving like this.
yeah, that was some wild
Yeah,
stuff.
it's
that was a
crazy.
little further than that, but
I
he's
know,
got
but like the vibe, I'm getting
Yeah.
this European kind of vibe.
Yes,
But
100%.
for me, I mean, your dad too had a BMW. My
Mhm.
dad had an E60 535, which he always says like, I spent way too much money on this,
Yep.
but it'll be like the last new like car I buy. And like, you know, there'd be days where it's like, you know, Dad, can I take the BMW? I'm going to my friend's house. And it's like, yeah. And it's like going to friend's house. It's like, all right, bro, stand on the side of the road and I'm going to like come down this windy road and like get a clip of me like
Yep,
doing
that's
this. And it was
awesome. Oh,
like
yeah.
feeling those cars out and understanding like, no, it's not just a dad car.
It's
It's
true.
like, and understanding
they're-
what the world, and I'm like a BMW geek. I got a 135
Yeah.
myself. And it's like getting into that world to me helps you, BMW world, helps you understand what the rest is out there.
Well, it
Right.
introduced me to the idea of the sleeper, right? Because
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
I love the idea of a car that looked professional,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
And that's when BMW's, Star and all those like films came out. Like those
Yep.
were huge because they were like, wow, I don't think ordinary people actually realized what these cars
Yeah.
were, and nobody knew what M meant
Right.
in the
Right,
90s.
yeah.
Now
There's an
it's-
M badge on everything.
But like
now.
the E60 M5 is like the ultimate example of that. You know, the
Yeah.
V10.
We talk about the E60 M5
Well,
on the podcast all the time.
because I want it.
I mean, that's
Sean wants one.
I own an E39 M5 and I've had it for 10 years now. And it's because that car to me was, it had one M5 badge on it,
Yep.
exterior. And other than the wheels and like a little bit of a finesse,
like a 5 Series.
It's a 5
It's-
Series,
exactly.
man.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
But then you hear it, like you get into it and you start getting that like growl. I don't like it. I like those stock exhausts.
Right.
I like it when it can completely blend in, and then you get into it a little bit and you go, ooh, what's that about? What's that about? And that's what I get like really jazzed about. Like that's the kind of stuff that got me into cars in a way that at the time, what I didn't know I was missing out on was like light little cars. So that's what I feel like I grew up a little bit when I learned, when I'm like, ooh, if you get something under 3,000 pounds, like this does things those ones don't.
Yeah.
you
Oh,
know?
yeah.
Like that's an exciting
Yeah.
feeling when like your 350Z would plow, but like a Celica GTS that weighs 2,500 pounds with the Lotus engine, that Yamaha built
Yep.
engine, you can chuck it in, and you're like,
Yeah.
well, I couldn't do that.
Super satisfying
in
feeling.
the Nissan. That's crazy. And it's just, you start to learn, and that's what I got obsessed with, was like, these cars feel different. I loved driving everything. I was never like, I would never snub anything.
Yep.
By the time I was 18, I think I had driven over 100 cars.
Wow.
And it was because anyone that offered me keys, I would take it. When I was 14 years old, I was a freshman in high school, and this kid, Ian, who was a senior, and kind of took me under his wing a little bit, because like we were, like he was just nice to me.
Yep.
He had a Volkswagen Fox, like those
Okay.
little, like,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
a-
yeah.
I think they made like a wagon version of it or something. But either way, he was like, it was like after like some weird school function, like a homecoming pep rally thing. We were in the parking lot, and he's like talking to his cool friends, and I was standing near him just being like a little lackey, and he was like, you drive a stick? I was like, yeah. He goes, why don't you pull my car around? And I did. I went and grabbed, I was 14 years old, and I went and I grabbed
That's
this
cool.
car, and so I started the list. And I
Nice.
was like, okay,
That's
here we
dope.
go. And then I was
Number-
like, give me the Crown Vics, give me like the
Yeah.
Pathfinders, give me
Yeah,
like
yeah,
anything
yeah,
I
yeah.
could get my hands on, because I'm like, the steering's looser, it takes more energy. Oh my God, this stick is like a really far throw, and if I don't hold it in, it pops out. Like,
Yeah.
stuff like that. That just like
how you
totally
Yeah.
blew my brains apart. Where I was like, they're all different,
Yeah.
and I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that was literally the best. I remember being in high school and all my friends had just different cars, and it's just getting a sense of that. I remember being 4 years old, and my babysitter had a Saturn something, a coupe with a stick, and it was just like so foreign to me. Like, it's like, what the hell is this?
You'd have to stare at it. And my aunt had a Volkswagen Golf, which turned out to eventually become my first car. But as like a 6 or 7 year old,
What gen?
I was a Mark III, so it was a
Yeah.
94. And I remember like sitting in that car, driving with her, and being like, "How do you know when to shift?" She goes, "Well, you just listen." And I was
Yeah.
like, "Listen."
I remember hearing the same thing. It's
And-
like, for what?
And 10 years of my life were like, "What do you mean listen?" Like,
Isn't that funny how that is?
Yeah. That's
Yep.
like reminds me of my dad. He had a Mark III Golf when we were kids, and he was one of the first people in southern Rhode Island to really like lower a car and do a full suspension setup. So my dad it wasn't slammed, but like, you know, he'd pick me up from school. It's like normal car. And here comes my dad, like super low, but he would take us on drives. And my dad grew up driving in the Alps. So he really knows how to drive fast. And when I was a kid, he would just absolutely hoon every single road. My mom's like, "You're being a terrible influence on him." And he would just like absolutely just send it every time.
I felt like having that influence, like with you with your dad, me with this guy up in Vermont, like I learned what like actual driving was, because around here it wasn't. It was drag racing, it was burnouts, it was just like
going in a straight line.
Hoonery, but not in control, if that makes any sense. Like I would watch people just do things, and like sure, it looked cool to the untrained eye, but like once you start to realize, you're like, yeah, he's gonna crash. Like he's lucky he got out of that. And you see it a lot today, especially like new BMWs are like the new Mustang,
right?
So you see people with just like way too much power, way too much trust in their own abilities, and a car that has very little feedback, if any, and a rear end that is as light as a pickup truck when you get into the throttle. So like you watch these people, that's why all those F80 crashes happen, because it was like, well, yeah, what did you think was going to happen, dude? Like, and they're all trying it for the first time out of a car show, where I'm like, if you haven't done this 100 times, don't try it now.
Back time. Everyone has their phone waiting.
I know you don't want to go to jail.
I think what really happens though is like young people, or just people who don't know what they don't know, they think they can do things because they've seen it done so many times. So they're like, well, I'm part of this community. That's me. I identify with this culture and this thing. So why not me? And then they try it and they look like idiots. And it's like, you know, it's like a skill, right?
It actually takes, So, you know, you describing the different feelings of cars and the shifting, steering, everything. Is that kind of how your channel came to be? You wanted to share that experience that you were having every time you were getting into a car, maybe for a first time, like you really wanted to express, like, you know, turning a knob for the first time and really kind of feeling that as a viewer.
It became that. In the beginning, it was just a YouTube channel. It was like, well, I want to pick up a camera. I want to film my friends. I want this to be entertaining, because like that's what YouTube was. And like anything that was sort of like car review was boring, because it wasn't really like, it was like, well, I don't just watch television.
Well, in the beginning, it was like Saab Kyle.
Saab
man,
Kyle.
what a throwback. I met Saab Kyle. He was a nice guy. But yeah, you're totally right. And so like for me, it was like I wanted to be part of the YouTube sphere, just to create things, just to feel like I made a thing. I liked filming, I liked editing. I just wanted to see what I could do. And then when it became more like, oh, the car stuff is like more accessible, and then people started throwing me keys. Like that was not a thing I was asking for. It was like, oh, I saw that thing you did, like you want to drive my Supra, or like this BMW or Ferrari, and you're like, what? And then I'm like, oh, this is my access. There's no other way I'm getting access to this stuff. And so it became that. And then once it's like a chicken and egg thing sometimes, because it's like, I want to start a YouTube channel, but I don't know how many cars. and then I'm like, well, you've gotta have a portfolio, right? Like you've got to show them that you're going to offer them something or give some value. And it's like, okay, but I don't have any cars. I'm like, well, then you don't have any videos. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, no one's handing you the keys to a 488 because you
with no track record.
Right. Like you gotta, you know, so I just, like I said, I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to build this up a little bit. I'll drive everything I can get my hands on. And then I realized, I'm like, you know, I need to simplify this. I had been doing some POV stuff with Winding Road Magazine, just freelance. And I'm like, I can do this on my own, and I can make more money doing it. And I can like inject my personality into it. Because the way that I look at anything YouTube related is, if you want people to give a shit about you, you need to add value first. Like you can't start out the gate as a vlogger unless you're stupid hot and really good at like backflips. Like that's the rule. Like, I'm sorry, like unless you're like just one of those like, you know, boy bandy kind of people, you don't get to just be like, here's my morning routine. No one fucking cares.
No one cares.
No one cares.
But guess what? A lot of people would watch Chris Harris wake up.
Oh yeah.
Oh, 100%.
Because but they wouldn't if he hadn't added the value.
Right. Exactly.
They need to.
100%.
They'd watch his beard
Great
grow.
point.
So like you have to be someone first. Like you have to.
Ben would shave his beard for him.
I wouldn't be here without Chris Harris. I would listen, but he adds value. He makes you feel like you are with him in whatever the.
He's one of the
hell
best
he's
drivers
doing.
out there.
He's a great driver too, but it's
Yeah.
like I'm writing about for our next show the SLS AMG Black Series, and he did a video 10 years ago now, and he's walking through the press area for the AMG Black, and he's going through all the different materials, and all the different weights of them, and the exhaust is different, and the drive shaft is different, and it's like I literally, if you okay, come over here, look at this, and it's like I literally felt like I was in high school again. Like, oh my god.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's
he's a
hard.
very good
It's hard to get
teacher.
that feeling.
It's
and like,
so hard.
Yeah.
I got really and this, it's not changed at all for me. I got really sick of like overly curated stuff. I got sick of like commercials basically, because like if you watch like a Hyundai commercial, it's like, wow, look at that amazing drive. They're racing
The
to
Elantra.
yeah. They're driving through an empty city, and it's like, okay, this isn't real. And like that's what became of like the car review. And
Yeah.
as much as it's entertaining to watch like a Top Gear review,
It's not super realistic.
I mean, I've put probably 2,000 or 3,000 miles on an LFA, and I got to tell you, I got none of it from the Top Gear reviews of that car. Like, that's not what it is. It's not what it's like. I mean, yes, it makes that noise, but it's just like, okay, you're showing me like a video game version of this, and it's like, I wanted to give people a really authentic, real view of the car. I want to show you, does the door handle stick? How does it sound when it closes? Is it like, what is it like to turn on the car? Even, and this is not a knock at all, but I'm just saying, even in a Chris Harris video, you'll rarely see a startup sequence.
That's
Do you know what I'm
right.
saying? Like,
Right.
these are things that I'm like,
Yeah.
I want to know what it's really like to be with this vehicle.
Yeah.
And if someone wants to watch this car on the Nürburgring, go for it. But if someone wants to know what it's like to start up a 365 Daytona and take it down the road and do a actual proper like little warm up with it, and maybe it's like sputtering and it's not tuned perfectly, but if you get into it a bunch of times, now it's kind of cleared the
Clear that
carbs
out,
and the valves are good and everything's right. Like, that's what it is. It isn't all perfect. And it's like, I want to show the imperfection. I want to show the authenticity. I want to show the squeaks and the rattles and these things, because that's another thing you never get from these big
and
car
rarely
reviews.
are any machines perfect unless it's absolutely brand new. But everything you see, whether it's social media or on YouTube, it's just like all filtered just to give you the, oh my god, it's great.
Yeah, and I think like the biggest turnoff for me in modern car videos now is like if I have to watch someone in the woods walk up to a car in the intro, I'm like, I'm out.
The fog is coming up.
I'm done. I'm already out. Like, I don't want to ever watch someone grab keys off of a countertop like that. That's like one of my biggest pet peeves. I know it's completely irrational and it's maybe just me, but I can't watch keys get grabbed off of a countertop.
Especially when it's like in a bowl with like all different brands, and they're like,
Yeah.
Which car are you driving today?
I'll watch a cup of coffee. Like, I'll watch like an espresso shot he pulled, because I'm into that. But I'm like,
Well, that's like Cars with Luke guy. I think he does like
Love
his
Luke.
videos are so satisfying to watch. I mean, I think he's done an incredible job of growing his channel and really giving you, I mean, it's a very high quality feel, but also giving you what it feels like to drive the car. And
yeah, and I think like with him, he's limited obviously by Switzerland, because like he can't actually.
I kind of like that though.
It's cool. It's cool. It's not where I go to find out what a car is like, but it is where I go when I want to feel like I can separate from reality for a little bit.
Oh yeah.
And be like, I just want to, because he's so creative. I like his shots. He's taken that to a level that I'm like, wow, like good for you. I mean, for me, I knew that I needed quantity, because YouTube favors 3 to 4 videos a week, right? If you aren't doing that as a small creator, you're not growing. It's just, or maybe that's not the case today, but it was the case a few years ago. I cannot create Cars with Luke level videos at all, first of all, but if I could, I couldn't do it 3 times a week.
The production quality is too high.
Couldn't do it. So
it's a lot of work.
That's where POV became like this secret weapon, where it was like, this is good enough, and it's giving a unique perspective on a car that no one has ever seen. And I'm positive there's probably a dozen cars that I have filmed that have never been filmed as POV, and have maybe never even been filmed in that way. They've only ever been filmed like driving up to a judging like stand at Pebble.
like the 300 SL you just did. I was
Sure.
Yeah, like that was one. I was like, oh, I've never seen a POV of this.
And that's the thing, is like I was very excited to drive that car. This job definitely jades you quite a bit.
Yes.
Because I think like 3 or 4 years ago, I might have passed out if you said, "Here's the
I know.
keys."
Trust me, we talk about that.
Yeah. It's a common thread. It's like
and in that video, I was like, "Oh, we went and grabbed lunch." Will was with us, PTSRS, and we went and grabbed lunch, and it was like, "Oh, you want to drive it back?" I'm like, "Oh, I'd love to."
Yeah,
that was I'd love to. Sure, I'd love to do that. And then I mean, it was great. I'm always grateful for every experience I have behind the wheel of a car, and I often have to like remind myself of like, either I'm driving something outrageous or someone has flown me somewhere to drive something outrageous. And sometimes I'm like, you're on an airplane, you're like, I just want to go home.
They're flying
then
you
you're
out.
like, and this is what I work so hard for.
And then you're like, my God, what an asshole. I am such an asshole. Like everyone I know.
Oh, you think you're smart, guy?
You're too good for this.
Waited in the TSA for 2 hours.
and it's like, wow, so those are those moments where like, you arrive in Montana and you're in a Chevy off-road pickup truck.
That was cool.
I mean, that kind of stuff is super fun. And I'm like, that's where I'm at now, where it's like the cars always get me going. I'm always interested in like a new experience. But like for me now, I really want to use them somewhere. I want to do something with them. Like I love the idea of going on like invite-only rallies where you're like, oh, wow, like we're actually going to go somewhere. Like this isn't just like, okay, polish, film, return. Like that is not the most exciting thing to me anymore. I mean, that's great. And it gets you in the door with a lot of different kind of wild things. Cause like, obviously some cars are not going to go do 2,000 miles in a weekend. Right. But like, I love the idea of using vehicles for their intended purpose, which is to take you somewhere that you couldn't otherwise go.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And I feel like a lot of people are always so afraid to use vehicles to their potential, but it's okay to use them. They're going to be okay. I
have a hot take about Porsche right now, and
this is we talk about Porsche a lot.
You got the shirt on,
and I know. I honestly,
Porsche's the
he's got a
forbidden P word
73
for
RS
us.
on.
I wore this to like soften the blow, but I really think that Porsche is getting close to jumping the shark here, because they went from like the rich lawyer prick in the 80s or so, right? 90s, and then I'll give Magnus a lot of credit for basically like revamping the image of Porsche, because it brought me into it. That's why I bought an Outlaw Porsche, because I was like, whoa, I hadn't really had these on my radar, and I didn't know they were this fast. I didn't know they were this fun to drive. I didn't know they were this raw. And he really brought that from like, oh, the dick down the street with the black 911, who you're like, ugh, to like, oh, you can like make these your own. This is cool. And you can actually like enjoy them. They're fun. He didn't give a shit about the odometers. Like that's fun. I like that. But in the wake of that, there was a lot of people like me who got into the Porsche game, but then there were a lot of people who went, obviously, I mean, for Porsche's sake, they latch onto this and they're like, yeah, we're going to make a lot of money off of this. And they start, latching onto originality and individuality, which brings PTS way into the picture and all this stuff, right? So, and that's all well and good because the cars are fantastic. But the reports I was getting from friends who are like Rennsport Reunion, they were telling me, they're like, yeah, I'm sitting in the grandstands watching a 904 race a 906, race a 910, and there's no one here. I'm like, what do you mean? That place looked packed. They're like, well, they were there, but they were waiting 6 hours in line for a t-shirt. And I was like, oh, that's not the point. That's not what this is. That's not good. And that worries me. And I also think that like,
as you're wearing the t-shirt.
Yeah, and it does. I mean, a friend actually gave me this.
Okay, all right, you're off.
So I didn't buy that. But like, it is one of those things where I'm like, ooh, I don't want these to just turn into poster cars, because they're not. Yeah. And I'll tell you, like, I love a GT3 as much as the next guy. They're great. I used to lust after them more. And I don't think that's because I've become jaded with the cars that I drive. Sure. Because like a 997 GT3 is still like my favorite thing in the world.
It's greatest.
But I go to, you go to every Cars and Coffee, and it's just like, I don't want to, no offense to Will. I love everything PTSRS. Sometimes I just don't want to talk about what color your car is. Yeah. Like that shouldn't be the highlight of your 9,000 RPM flat six.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree.
Well, and it's crazy because, you go through COVID and no one can buy cars. No one can get a car. There's this huge wait list, and you've got all of these other companies pushing service. And it's like, to me, there would be some sort of marketing on, well, if you drive more than X amount of miles a year, we can take X amount off your service, which might give some people some sort of incentive exactly to drive their car. I mean, to me, I have a 230,000 mile Porsche, and you have a Porsche with a replacement engine.
Yep.
It's like that's the point, is not to keep your odometer as low as possible. And I think people are missing that.
I'm thankful for Seinfeld for saying, like, when you get to heaven, if you lose if you have the lowest mile Porsche.
Yeah.
Now the thing is, on the surface, that's a great statement. In context, you're like, you're a billionaire, dude.
Yeah.
Like, and it's
certain
not
cars. I think
he's right.
He is right, but I think it also, I could see it. Like a modern car, like a modern GT3, there's no point not to drive the shit out of it.
Absolutely.
Right?
There's a lot, guys. There's a lot of them.
I know.
Did you know they made a lot of these?
It's not
there's a lot of them.
Yeah. There's and
so it's just hard because it's like,
you can't redline. It's going to be on the DME report.
Oh my God, the DME report. But the Porsche thing is a tricky thing, and I'm wondering, and I don't know how they maintain the cool factor in the next 10 years, because I'm already feeling like less cool about it now.
Mm-hmm. I could see that. I feel that.
Well, it's a very oversaturated world. Everyone's into them.
Yeah. Well, and I think I'm curious. Do you think it has to do with because I feel like Ferraris do absolutely nothing for me these days.
I would agree with you,
and I think it's I see it. The last Ferrari that I was like, okay, I love this car was like, the TDF, the F12 TDF.
Yeah.
That was like the last. I was like, this is fucking awesome. But like the stuff that they make now, I'm just like, it's
296. I think is really.
It
cool.
does nothing for me.
Really?
Absolutely nothing.
I think it's amazing.
I think it's cool. It's cool. I appreciate it, but like, it's just not. You get in the 99. The new GT3 products are great, or the GT products are great, and they're fun. You definitely can feel they're a lot less analog. Yes. But you still have that connection, and I feel like, I've driven the 296, I've driven some of the modern Ferrari stuff. It's just the way I describe it, it's like fake fast. It's like, it just doesn't.
I hear you.
Yeah.
It just doesn't.
So I think one of the things that it's a line that I walk all the time is, how do I not become a grumpy old man complaining about the new generation? Because I hate that.
The grumpy
I'm
old
right there
car
with
guy.
you.
I hate it when people are like, oh, these millennials, they don't know. Oh, these Gen Z kids, they'll never drive a stick. I'm like, bro, they don't need to. It's fine. I mean, if they're interested, they'll learn, and it's great. Like, I'm not going to complain. I don't think everyone who's younger than me is an asshole.
Right. Yeah.
I'm going to be old someday, and I would like to embrace what's happening. But at the same time, how do I give my personal opinion on something without sounding like the grumpy old guy who just, you guys don't know how it was? Because guess what? Every generation says the exact same thing.
Absolutely.
It's not a new statement for me to be like, well, they'll never know the sound of this. Like, of course they won't, because it doesn't exist anymore. Like,
and it's illegal now.
Like, the world is different. And they're like, oh, I used to love the smell of gasoline. And I'm like, and you're dumber for it because it was leaded fuel.
You have lost brain cells, sir.
Like, it's just wild when it's like, there's reasons. It's like I used to go to the drag strip and we could just race without helmets. I'm like, people died. On a Tuesday. Just people.
And that was normal.
And it was fine. No problem.
And it is just frustrating. The thing that frustrates me though is like to be able to play both sides, right? To be like, I mean, like, look, if you were to tell me like, hey, I'm going to give you this like Tesla Model 3 to commute in every day, like, great.
That's what I do.
Cool.
That's me.
That's fine.
He's got one.
Absolutely. That's true. But if you were like, I'm going to give you that Porsche 356 Speedster and you're going to have to commute in it, you're going to be like, oh, I got to get on the highway with like trucks.
Yeah.
Like,
Which,
I can't,
you feel,
it's fine for a ride.
Yeah.
It's not good for like 12,000 miles a year on the Mass Pike. Like, that's not
you're gonna die.
You'll die.
Yeah.
And like, that's the thing. There's like a time and a place, and what's getting more and more difficult just with like development and population growth and more cars on the road. It is getting harder to drive these cars because it's getting harder to find the window.
Yeah. It is.
Of where and how do we do it.
That's a perfect example of a car. It's a 55 Speedster. It's got, it's got 10,000 miles. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
A low mile car.
Original miles.
But, the tires are this wide.
Yeah.
And it weighs nothing. And when a car passes you, a modern SUV,
you're like this.
It shifts. Like, it's like you can't.
Yeah.
You got to drive it early in the morning, and it's a fucking awesome car. But like you said, like, it's all about the experience, and I'd much rather drive that for an hour, maybe once a week, than any modern Ferrari.
Yeah. Well, and
Sorry.
It's all right. It's all good.
he's not okay.
Dude,
he likes his Porsche better anyway.
I do like my Porsche better, but I'm also I have like
You're like so cultured.
it's my dude. It's
I know,
my
it's painful.
It's my Italian duty. I was born in Italy. Obviously, I love Ferrari. I love Ducati motorcycles. Like I love all that. I just don't want to be like smited with like a spaghetti. Like,
Are they making a manual?
I heard a
Roma?
rumor about this. Yeah.
Is that
a manual
a gated
Roma?
Roma or something?
Ooh.
I heard a rumor about a manual Ferrari coming.
There needs to be like a lower horsepower, like 500 horsepower stick Ferrari, like mid-engine car. That would be perfect.
Yeah, rip the roof off of it,
Yeah.
make it beautiful, and let it sing. Like I think you bring up a good point though. Is like car companies don't take. I don't know if this is correct. I don't think car companies are taking risks like they should be.
They're not.
And
No, because it's all
And
about
Ferrari
the
has
motor.
the ability to take
and-
risks.
And that was going to be my next thing.
Mercedes does.
For the last 10 years, basically, there's been a save the manuals movement, and there are companies that are going out of their way to produce manuals. And the first company that comes to mind is Hyundai with their N division. It's going really well. But like, where do we go from here? Like,
Right.
Everything is so easy. Everything is so fast. Those Hyundais are great cars. I mean, it's being led. The whole department's being led by a guy from the M division at BMW. Everything is great right now. So like, what's next? Do we just get faster? Do we get more feel?
I think faster was the biggest mistake anybody ever
I
made.
agree.
And
Yeah.
like
Everything is so fast.
I kind of blame the Germans for this because we're sitting in front of a Black Series and a DTM, and it's like AMG always kept like amping it up, and it was like, oh my god, now you've got like an SL65 with 600 or 700 horsepower and all this stuff, and it's cool, but like the problem was that like the M division boxed themselves into a corner because they went from a V8 M5 to a V10 M5. What's next, guys?
Yeah.
What are you gonna do next?
Right, right.
Are you fucking crazy?
Yeah.
You're gonna give them more, and they gave them more, and then they gave them more, and then they're
Yeah.
like, oh god, we need all-wheel drive, and then they gave them more, and it's just this whole thing. And unfortunately, people started normal people. Normal non-car people who like cars but aren't car people. It's like tourists. They think
Like tourists.
Get off my lawn.
they just want pickup. Oh, it's peppy.
Right.
Oh, it's got pickup. They just
Yeah.
want that. And they gave like vile access
that car's
to power.
got good pickup.
Well, then it became this whole like. Remember, I don't think it is anymore. But there was such an obsession with beating 7 minutes on the Nürburgring.
Yeah.
like that was a huge.
The fact that we know what the Nürburgring is
is
already kind of don't take that for granted. I mean, the Nürburgring was like, if you know kind of thing 15, 20 years ago. And maybe
Now everyone
maybe
knows
longer
about
than
it.
that. Maybe long, because it wasn't until Gran Turismo 4 put it on their
Also,
game.
the
like, probably
roof,
saved
the
it
roof
to-
of
that normal
Yellowbird
people
also
knew.
made it
Yeah.
super famous with that film of it drifting
Yeah.
around.
Oh, absolutely.
That's a car people film.
That's
like,
a car people
Yeah.
film.
Like
Right.
this, like everyone knows.
That's
the
a very,
Nürburgring.
very famous film.
Yeah.
Amongst the people we associate
Yeah,
with.
exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of thing. Man, cars are weird because there's such a variety, and it's of enthusiasts, and you can peg them for where they are in this level in an instant.
Yep.
Because you can talk to someone for 10 seconds and be like, all right, he's not a driver, or
Right.
he has no idea of anything that was produced before 2010, or he just buys everything new. It's like we've all walked into a collection where there's every new Ferrari in the same color and this and that, and they're like, haha, and you're like, okay, it's a showroom. What are you talking about? What's the story? That you have money? Because I get that. I saw the house. But like, there's people who are cultivating cars as art and don't drive them, and I respect that, because you're like, well, I get it. You put this thing in your living room. It's the most beautiful thing in the world. You're an
kills me.
architect, right? But at the same time, then there's other people who are like race car drivers, but totally don't give a shit about any of the details and all the nuances. They're like, it drives good, and they're the fastest guy you've ever met in your life, and he couldn't talk to you for 10 seconds about the about the history or the car or whatever, but this guy is just a driver, end of list. And it's cool to be able to interact with all these walks of life and try to bridge through it all. Like,
Yeah.
I try to walk through, because like I'll never know as much about colors as Willie. I'll never know as much about like Ferrari history or Italian car history as like Steve Serio.
Yep.
But what I can do is I can have experiences driving them, so that way I can relate to what their joy is and what brings them into the fold. And if I do my job right, if I'm showcasing these cars correctly and I'm like giving people the excitement in the videos, I hopefully in fostering some love for these cars for a younger generation, or giving some nostalgic appreciation for an older generation.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense to me.
That's the best part, is getting the kids involved. Like, because kids, we try to explain this to people all the time about YouTube. It's like all the people, not all, but your vast majority of car viewership is going to come from kids who can't get in their own car and drive. I mean, they're looking for that outlet.
Experience somehow.
And if you can, get any kid to, sit in a car or watch a video and get that hook, it's, first of all, it's not rocket science. And second of all, you're actually making a difference.
I mean, look, I did a video that I thought, man, there's a bunch of these out there, and it was just how to drive a manual transmission. And I went from like literally a dead stop to like you've never even seen a stick shift before, to the end of the video is heel toe downshifting and rev matching on the way. And it's 2 or 3 million views. Wow. And every single day I must get a dozen comments on that video that are like, literally, I've never driven one before. I went out and did it today, and the only reason I knew how to do it was because of this video.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible.
That's cool.
That makes me so happy. And it's not because I'm some elitist prick who's like, oh, I'd never drive an automatic transmission. That's terrible. These kids don't know how to do it. That drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, guys, drive whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah.
Money also matters, because like some kid who's like, I just really need this car, but like maybe if I'm not good at driving it, it's going to suck for me. I can't risk buying a manual transmission. Sure, don't. I'm not going to say like, he's not a true enthusiast because you got the SMG. Now the SMG, you don't know about this. A single clutch manual, it's automated, but
still manual.
And if you go to cars.com, sometimes it says manual. You got to check for that little, it's a whole thing. And so drives me out of my mind. I just don't like the elitism behind the manual movement.
Right.
But I'm like, well, then maybe I'll just be part of the solution. So like, I don't have to be an elitist about it, but I can also just teach people.
Yeah, you can be informative.
Because whenever someone says to me, they're like, oh, that's you don't drive a manual, you're not a real car guy. I'm like, how many people have you taught this year?
Yeah.
Then shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Because if you haven't taught 2 million people like me, then shut the fuck up.
And think about all the people who
you're right.
Think about all the kids who lied to their employer, their new valet job, that they can drive a manual transmission. They go home and watch your video. And now they all of a sudden can drive a manual transmission.
You bring up a good point. I may have saved some clutches.
Probably for sure.
But I mean, I don't know. That's the thing about the car culture too, is that like we've all been to the car show where someone like shits on someone's car. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, that's not the point. Like, you might not like something, but I don't need to shit on it. I can walk past it. It's cool. And the same goes for like the Save the Manuals movement. It's like, I want everyone to feel included. And the only way to be inclusive is to be inclusive. If you want the world, this goes for everything, whether it's politics or cars. If you want someone to align with you, shitting on them is going to be completely counterproductive. All you're going to do is put them on defense. And now, even if they weren't defensive about this to begin with, they are now, because you've created a defense. That's it. So if you want someone to be part of the thing that you love, if you want to amplify the love for a thing that you love and you want to share that with people, the correct way to go about it isn't saying, well, you don't love it and understand it, so you're an idiot. It's to show them.
Yeah.
Because I know for a fact that like Porsches didn't make sense to me until I saw Magnus ripping through in 277. And I know that's like a really like stupid thing to say, but the reality is I didn't know because I wasn't exposed to them.
He's inspired a generation of people, and he's done such a good job of breaking the mold, and like someone who is truly themselves, and like being authentic is so important. And looking at your history, you were in corporate America for a little bit. How did you go from corporate America to YouTuber?
I think that everyone has a breaking point with everything in their life. So if there's a friend that you just can't be around anymore because they're a bad influence, or they're just like, they're only unloading on you, or if you're in a relationship that's suddenly so toxic that you're like, okay, that was the point. Maybe all your friends around you saw like, oh, this isn't healthy for you, but it took you 5-6 years to finally get to the point where it was enough. It took me 10 years to get to the point where I'm like, I've had enough. I can't do this anymore. And I'm so thankful that it got that bad, because if it didn't get that bad, I'm a New Englander. Pain is work.
Relatable.
It's relatable.
It's expected.
And you're not supposed to give up.
Right.
You're not, because it's a fail. So for me, like, I did love my job for a long time. I'm a mechanical engineer. I went to WPI, got my engineering degree, went down to South Carolina to be a process engineer on printing presses. We printed Duracell battery labels and postage stamps on these huge, like presses the size of this building. And my job was to be like, pull scrap out of the operation, like make money. So you add $1 million to the operation, great. You paid yourself and you paid the company, good job. Then I went into a global role and I was working in the garment industry, printing labels in your clothes. So everywhere that your clothes are made is where I would be. So for 4 or 5 years, I was in like Bangladesh and Vietnam and Indonesia and, Germany, El Salvador, Honduras, China, whatever, everywhere. And I did that 2 weeks a month. Like, I was not in the country 2 weeks a month for like 4 or 5 years. And I liked that job, but it made it difficult to have a life. Right. And then once we worked our way out of, like, we all got laid off because it was like, well, you saved $24 million year one. You can't do that every year. So eventually you're like, okay, well, our teams are expensive and don't matter anymore. So I ended up going into another job as a project manager with another company. And that's where I was like, I went from kind of living the life of like a wartime photographer, because I didn't go to nice places. Mm-hmm. I wasn't in Milan. Yeah. I was in Dhaka. Right. Okay. Like during elections, like I saw some shit. And I got used to it. But then I went from that to commuting from Boston to Attleboro every day for an hour, just sit in a carpeted cubicle and stare at emails and talk to people who didn't work for me and try to convince them to do their job on time. Oof. And then they had cutbacks. So instead of being like, oh shoot, we're having cutbacks, it was like, here's like 4 more projects to like pile on your plate. And I couldn't breathe. I was just sitting in my chair every day. The best part of my day was leaving that chair and going for what used to be 10-minute walks and became 20-minute walks, became 40-minute walks, became like, I can't go back in that building. I don't want to go back in that building. And I got to a breaking point where I'm like, look, I'm making enough on YouTube that I can pay my bills. I will not make money, but I will be net zero. And I was like, there has to be, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. And I quit, and it was the best feeling in the world. And then COVID happened like a month later. And then it actually helped because I didn't have any FOMO with my friends because no one could do anything. Right. So it wasn't like, oh, now I don't have the money to go on this trip with you guys. It was like, no one's going anywhere. Nice. So I just got to make videos, and like, I was like, all right, I'm just going to drive as many cars as I can and build. And then that first year it went from like a 30,000 subscriber channel to like 100,000 subscriber channel. And then it was just boom. Now there's money. Now it's real. Now it's happening. Now people want, and the more exposure you get, the more keys you get. And then comes the OEMs where they're like, hey, we're launching this new car, come drive it. And that brings in a whole other element of it, just because you're like, well, how do I remain unbiased when someone's flying me out to a 5-star hotel and whining and dining and then being like, here's the new Honda HR-V.
Don't mess it up.
It's good.
Yeah. Like, and so I always just kind of still took my take on it. Like they brought us like that car, sure, it's like a underpowered little CVT guy, but they brought us to probably the best driving road in like Southern Washington. So I mobbed on these roads, and I was just like, awesome. And I'm like, this has a great chassis. This should not be overlooked.
Yeah,
like
that's cool.
That's
really cool.
We did a driving tour down in Virginia, and we rented a Volkswagen Teos as our like film truck, and we're looking at it and we're like, oh great. But we had so much fun driving that on those back roads and couldn't get over how good it was. So sometimes when you're around this stuff all the time, like you said, you get jaded. But when you get into a normal car like that and realize how good a normal car can be, you really appreciate
everything's gotten better.
Everything's good now.
Everything's gotten better.
Everything is good.
Do you remember, so when I was in high school, people drove like Pontiac Grand Ams, Pontiac Sunfires, like a Chevy Cavalier, death traps.
Oh yeah,
like actual bad cars.
Bad cars.
This is when cars were bad.
I remember my dad telling me when I was in high school, it's like, if you want a cool car, you better work hard, because otherwise you're gonna end up with a Chevy Cavalier. And I remember thinking, oh no,
oh my god.
Everyone had Dodge Neons.
Like, the Neon. Like these are straight up death traps.
Actual bad cars.
You can't survive. And the other thing was like the SUVs at the time were trucks. Like they were
Durangos.
It was not even like these were not like unibody SUVs. These were like body on frame Suburbans. You get hit by a 2500 Suburban in a Neon, you're fucking dead.
You're dead. You're done.
No chance.
Sure.
Yeah. And now like an entry level car, a base 11th gen Civic is the fucking nicest thing in the world.
Oh, yeah.
I know.
Insane chassis, engines, okay, whatever. But like that thing, you can mob in that car.
Oh, yeah.
And you can get in an accident, you don't die.
Yeah. No, it's
Yeah.
incredible how far it's come.
only been 20 years.
Insane.
I had a RAV4 when we went to California, basically
yeah.
like a CRV, not an HRV, but that thing handled really well. We were in Europe. I had a Yaris Cross, which was like a smaller
It's a
RAV4
small- oh, okay.
with
Oh,
a
I got you.
hybrid. Dude, talk about mobbing. That thing, it's just instant torque and it just stays there with a 3-cylinder. It's like, where the hell are we in time? Like,
Oh, it's
we've
insane.
progressed so far that everything is fun.
Yeah, I had
In a certain way.
the 3-cylinder Mini for a while, and even Ben, like,
Oh my God,
those were
well,
great.
he had this thing where we're going to the Greenwich Concours, our first like trip when we
Yeah,
first started
yeah,
working
yeah,
here. It was
yeah.
like 5 years ago, and Antonio's like, "Watch this," and he takes it from 6, dumps it into 3rd, auto downshift, and all of a sudden we're just flying.
Yeah.
and it's like, how is it doing this? And I look, and we're doing $120 like a second later on a closed course, and it was just incredible.
95 in
Yeah,
Connecticut.
it was.
same, right?
I love it there.
Dude, it's nuts.
Yeah, sorry. So
go ahead.
Ben and I used to have so much fun because on the way home, because we live in
Oh,
a
yes.
similar spot, he would have his 1 Series, I would have my 3-cylinder Mini, and we would always hit the same exit
There's
ramp
this like
together.
horseshoe exit.
Yeah.
yeah.
And one day I was in front of him, and that was the fastest I've ever taken it. And I had like liftoff oversteer around the thing, and we were like, ah! And then
I'm
we were
like, you're drifting.
in a front-wheel drive car.
Well,
It
and
was
that's
so much fun.
That's another like level of elitism in the car industry is like, oh, it's not rear-wheel
Yeah,
drive.
it's
You're
front-wheel
like,
drive.
and I'm
Yeah.
like, bro, do you know how scary a front-wheel drive
Yeah.
car is on the limit? Like, you are
Yeah.
not driving these.
Yeah.
Like, I scare myself in that Civic once in a while
That's a
because
great car.
I'll feel it out and I'll be like, oh god, here we go. And I'm just like, because the thing is, in like a rear-wheel drive car, I'm very confident and comfortable. Is what I've always driven.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like, if I overcook it into a corner
Yeah.
and I know I need to bleed off some speed in a decreasing radius corner, I'm fine with a little slip and I'm just gonna like power through it at a gentle angle. In a front-wheel drive car, you're bleeding off speed, so now you're sideways, and the only way out is power.
Yeah. It is a
Drag
scary
power.
feeling.
And
It
you're
is
like,
very scary
shit.
feeling.
Yep.
And so there's like this whole element where I'm like, don't like go watch some old like touring car championship things with like Jason Plato in front wheel drive,
Yes.
like Megans or whatever. I'm like, you want to tell me that is not driving? That is the craziest
Yeah.
shit in the world.
Well, if you talk to any real professional, they will tell you to start in front wheel drive car and master it, and then if you go to a rear wheel drive car, everything just gets much easier and much more stable and much just easier. So if you go backwards, you cannot. If you grew up in a rear wheel drive car and you get in your car, which you drove here today, brand new Civic Type R, which we all love, it's like it won't happen.
It's wild.
I can't get over how good that car is. We were at Club Motorsports, and we had the previous generation Type R, and we were hooning it around the track.
They're so good.
So much fun.
It's incredible.
nuts.
And like that's where I'm not so pessimistic about the future. Everyone, oh no, nothing good. Yeah, there's some dumb things happening. There's some band-aids happening. I mean, the internal combustion engine right now, as it sits, is a band-aid on a band-aid on a band-aid on a band-aid on a band-aid. Like, you can look at some of these engines and some of these old cars from like the 50s and 60s, and you're like, yep, it has an intake, and it fires, and it exhausts. End of list. Well, what it doesn't have is like all these recirculating vacuum systems to make sure that emissions, it's just like Band-Aid on Band-Aid on Band-Aid on Band-Aid. And that's where we're at. And so it's like now we're at the point where it's like, okay, in order to trick the emissions rules, you need to have a hybrid system that's going to get it off the line. And then you're going to need turbos that are going to allow you to give the customer the power they want, but in this, we're going to stay out of boost and blah, blah, blah. And then at the end of it, the EPA rating on like a new Lexus GX is the same as the old V8 that's been out for 12 years. And it's like, well, we didn't
do anything.
What are we doing? And so that's frustrating, but I'm also
But it
not
got bigger.
Oh, yeah.
but I'm not going to poo-poo sometimes because once in a while you get a gem like an FK8 or an FL5 Type R, and you're like, well, shit, they're still doing it. They're still doing it, and those moments are where you're like, it's not dead. I'm not gonna complain about how everything's different. I'm old. Everything's different. I liked it before. Guys, it was shit before, and the same.
It was really shit before.
It was. I mean,
you keep your Sunfire.
Yes. Yeah. Don't come. Like I drove a 90 Ford Escort once with like you can watch the fuel getting injected into the into the thing. Like, it's the crazy. I'm like, what the and it's like a 3-speed, and I'm driving it on the highway, and I'm like, I remember that car being like a lot of kids' parents' car, right?
Yeah.
Because that was probably like a $9,000 car in the 90s. And I remember getting on the highway thinking, oh, I'll just take it on the highway. And I was doing 60, and I was at like 5,000 RPM. I'm like, what the and so suddenly I'm like, oh, these were built for like a 55 mile an hour speed limit. These were built for like, I'm like, who commuted in these?
Yeah.
And then suddenly this like cute little like, oh, what a relic of the past. Good thing it didn't rot away. Became like one of the most dangerous drives I've ever done.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, this is what everyone's mom was driving. Of course, all these people died in car accidents. This is horrifying.
It's pretty wild. You know what's great about like driving so many cars is, at least for me personally, I feel like I had like a certain opinion about certain cars.
Oh,
and that is totally changed
out
now.
the door.
I don't judge anything. Like,
never.
I was telling a story a couple weeks ago. I've been very fortunate to drive a lot of really great cars. One of the best driving experiences I've ever had was in a Bug-Eye Sprite.
Oh, I believe it.
And you know, I had just gotten out of a 458 or something. We were moving cars from one building to the other, and it's like, oh, here's the Bug-Eye Sprite. Oh boy,
you take it.
I get in it, and
it's so fun.
My drive from it was like a 15-20 minute drive. I got back and I was amazed. So much fun, and it's like I'm going full throttle everywhere. I'm feeling everything that the car is doing. It's like, I don't know if that's a non-synchro box or not, I can't remember, but like shifting it was so fun. Like, yeah, the brakes are not that good, but it's so light, so it stops like decently well, and it totally changed my opinion on it. I was like, you know what, yeah, I would 100% buy one of those. It's awesome.
And conversely, I bet you really love Testarossas, and then you drive one and you're like, oh boy,
yeah, no, thank you.
You know what? I understand the values now.
I was about to say that. Yeah.
It's one of those things where, you know, like you have to, it goes to show you how good marketing is, because the Ferrari badge on so many cars really makes you believe that this is the best thing known to man. And then between the driving experience, and if you're ever under an old Ferrari with like a proper mechanic who shows you their mistakes, that's when you're like, wow. Like, I was taught to believe that there is nothing greater than a Ferrari.
They did a great job of doing that, though.
They did.
As the resident Italian, I gotta defend
genius.
Yeah, that makes sense though.
But there's a Ferrari for me is like, I'll drive a certain Ferrari and be like, this car is like absolute, like 330 GTC.
That's
one of the best.
Oh yeah,
that is
one
of the most unbelievably drive. But then you get in another.
And it's like what happened in the late 80s?
And I drove a ratty one, and I still love it.
And then you drive in the 80s, you're like, what am I doing?
A lot of cars are like that though from that era.
Okay, keep selling it to yourself,
dude. I love Porsche, but there's a lot of Porsches that you're like this as well.
Yes, you're not wrong.
You're not wrong. But they also drive nice.
Thank you, Tom.
And they start.
So I also, there's the marketing thing is wild because like I hate it.
Such a prick.
I hate it when someone with no context and no like actual like position behind it just goes, well, German engineering.
That's the Germans for you.
So you mean engineering that occurred in the country of Germany? And what about that? Nothing?
Yeah.
Nothing? There's nothing beyond that? You just say those two words because they put it in the fucking commercial? It's crazy. And I'm thinking to myself, every time I was in for service with my E92 M3, pulling the fucking rod bearings out, doing another valve cover gasket, doing another rear main seal, I'm like, oh yeah, German engineering. Genius.
Yeah.
You know what doesn't need that? A fucking LS.
Yeah. Water pump immediately at 60.
Like, I mean, it's wild what marketing does to car culture and how people become really brand loyal. And if I can do anything in my job, I want to disintegrate brand loyalty for no reason. Like, there's no reason to say this.
There's so many cars out there.
There's so many things that suck. Yeah. That you love because it has the badge on it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's one of my things is a car will be announced, and the easiest example is the new M2. It comes out, everyone sees a picture of it on their screen that's like this big.
You're like, what
and
is
they're
happening?
like, wow, it looks so bad. And my thing is, it's like, just at least wait till you see it in person. Like, at least give it that. And then if you say you don't like it, fine. But it's like, we have one. There's one of our
then
guys
you see it in person. You're like, the picture, it sucks.
No, that's not what I was getting at.
I'm waiting.
Never mind.
I'm waiting for the other side of this story.
No,
the story there.
No,
That's it.
No, yes, I agree.
It looks well. Johnny
you
even
can't
posted
judge a book-
something the
you
other
can't judge
day.
a book by its
he
cover.
says,
Yes.
he says, "Oh, there's a red one here, and it looks so much better than the blue one." The point of my story is, I had the same experience. There's a red one around, black wheels. It looks good.
I saw a black one and I liked it because it covered every line of
hit
the
everything.
vehicle.
And then I took
It's just like, keep it clean, guys. Don't get it dirty because I might see some
I
contours.
took a screenshot of this one the other day on the BBS Facebook
Okay,
page.
you know what? That's good. That's legit. That's not bad.
That
Yeah.
looks freaking sick.
'cause
Yeah, that looks
Don't
good.
show Sean.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I'm seeing it from like 10
That
feet away.
Barry's not
so
allowed to see
Sean,
it.
no
problem.
excuses. It's going sideways. You're gonna see the whole thing.
You know what I love about your social media is, so on our
you
YouTube
like
channel,
it. You just don't want to say you like it.
it looks good. It does look good.
I'm talking to him.
I had the first gen, so
Okay.
But what I love about your social media is, from our point of view, we get a lot of comments, a lot of good comments, a lot of comments that don't make sense, and there's also a lot of negative comments. And I love the way that you treat the negative comments when you share something to your story, and I'm like, yes, like this is
I love
hilarious.
it.
It's so funny.
I want to have fun with it, like, and I am a sensitive individual. Like
Yeah, of course.
if someone's
too.
like, there's times when I'm like, yeah, I really shouldn't be looking at comments right now. Like, I'm not having a good day, and like maybe there's a little gem in there that says, Tedward, you're so handsome and a skilled driver. What a great guy. And I'd be like, oh, that's just what I needed. Guess what? That's not usually what is popping up on the thing.
Yeah.
And it's not even negativity toward me. Sometimes it's just the negativity toward a car,
Or
like
just life in general.
it
People
just-
are so miserable.
it's exhausting, and
I
it's
love
like
it.
if I drive a Ford Bronco off road,
Hey.
they're like, I hate
Straighten up.
Ford.
Come on.
I love it,
Dude, you're
my
slouching.
whole thing. I've gotten this like 3 times. It's like you're on camera and you're slouching. It's like you're bringing down the whole brand. It's like that's kind of why we're here, is to like bring some looseness to like the collector car world.
Well-
and it's like it's just the best.
It's tiring, and so I try to, like, some people are clearly like, you have to think about who you're commenting back at, because there's clearly people who are either mentally unstable, not all there, and I don't want to like shit on those people because that's like not a nice thing to do. But then there's people that you're like, I know that you really believe the thing you just wrote, and like I just want to like feel it out. I want to like, or maybe like
See where this goes.
I just want to like expand upon this.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
give me more. Tell me more about the thing. Like why? Like I want like an essay on what you just said. That's insane. And I try to make it a little light, a little funny. I try to get my own redemption from it too. But I try not to do it in a way, like once in a while I'll do those where I kind of I clap back, and then I'm waiting for the juicy response.
and then there is none.
No, they respond and they go, "Oh my God, you're right. I was in a bad mood. I'm really sorry."
Oh,
and
hell yeah.
and there's
People
like a lot
are
of
actually
those.
vulnerable.
Good.
And I'm like, "Thank you." Like and that's such a redeeming feeling, is when someone says something that they're so certain about, and you kind of just suss them out a little bit, and then they're like, "Sorry about that," and you're like, "Oh, yeah, you're
Well,
cool. That's fine."
It's almost like if you know the golden rule, like, if you don't have anything nice to say, then don't say it at all. But when you're about to comment, you're not like looking at someone directly in the face, so it's a lot easier to just put the comment.
Keyboard
and
warrior,
post
my
it.
man.
Yeah.
Well, also, there's also the level of like a lot of people, especially if you're driving cars that are like kind of worn or old, or just things that are unusual that they clearly have not driven. They might be like, "You shift like my grandma." I'm like, well, your grandma must be really good at driving, because
Yeah.
you didn't hear a single crunch, and this is the worst gearbox I've ever driven.
You're riding the clutch.
Yeah.
And so like you're like, yeah,
It's also not your car. You don't want to crash it or anything bad
Yeah.
happen.
Hello.
Like, people don't get it.
absolutely. And like, there's just certain things that occur, like if you're telling me that all your experience in manual driving is like a modern gearbox, like you do not know what you're talking about when you're telling me you're like in every synchro is worn in that 356 and you're just trying to get through the day, right?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
I'm going to shift it a little differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Than your
Take a little
Civic.
bit longer.
There's going to be a little bit of a time, or I might double clutch it. I might let the revs drop and then rev it up a little bit so it falls into the next gear. Rev matching and upshift is a thing. I'm sorry. It's a thing with old cars that sometimes you have to do. Sometimes it's because they're cold and the revs drop fast and the gearbox is cold. And there's always going to be a comment that's like, you don't rev match upshifts. Well, you do when it needs it.
Yeah,
That's where I'm at. I mean-
No. You're 100% right. I mean, I think the three of us can attest to that. I mean, we've been lucky to drive a lot of stuff, and there are people out there that make it look super easy, but it's pretty hard to drive some of these old things, and like you can really appreciate how far the modern car has come from, you know, driving something old. I mean, you really do appreciate it.
Well, I think that's there's a 300 SL behind us, and I think that's one of the most impressive things to me with that car is because of the historical context I have in these vehicles. I can drive that and go, oh my God, this was 1955.
Yeah,
I've heard
that
that
car is
literally what I tell everyone.
That thing is
about
a spaceship.
But it is. I always tell people, are like, you know, one vintage car that you can own that you would have to drive a lot. 300 SL.
I can't believe it because you drive a lot of stuff from that period and you're like, oh boy.
Yeah, like okay, I'm done. 20-minute drive.
Yep.
That's you can drive across country and be like,
oh my God, it's a modern vehicle. It's fantastic.
yeah.
I did the Millimillion 21 with Donald in a 1940 Fiat Seata, and it's a one-of-one car, non-synchro gearbox. It weighed like 500 kilograms, 46 horsepower. I say this on every episode. The scariest car that I've ever driven. I mean, that thing is terrifying. Giant wheel, drum brakes, and that totally changed my perspective on old cars.
When you see like vintage racing and you watch someone
like the Beast of Turin or like
Well,
one of
not
those
even-
crazy cars, like
it's just the historical context becomes immediately apparent when you drive some cars from period and
Oh,
you go,
it's
oh, that's
wild.
not what I thought it was.
Yeah, it's wild.
You know, because everybody, it's like
it's not
the same-
just the old guy driving down the road in his Model T.
No,
Like,
it's the same as like in sports. It's like you could say like, oh wow, those guys were slow back then on their bicycles or whatever. It's like, you want to ride a bike from 1945? Like you're not doing the
Yeah.
Tour de France on a Cervelo. Like this is going to be rough. You're going to
Yeah.
have a bad time. These chains were loose. Like everything was horrible. There was loss. The tires were awful. Like
Your ass will chafe.
Yes. Yeah. Those seats were probably not built for humans. Like,
Not really.
and even that like goes to say that you were talking about seating positions, the driving positions in some of these old cars. You gain respect just for the fact that someone had the balls to get behind the wheel and push it that hard, basically having no control on this seesaw of a thing.
Yep.
And I mean, was it oh man, Graham Hill's son or somebody did like a video like a few years ago in a Series 2 Ferrari 250 GTO.
yeah, it's a great video.
And the thing is, I don't know if
The Petrolicious one?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's just going up and down a
Yeah.
hill.
Just no audio
And
except
yes,
the noise
It's
of the
just
engine.
the engine. And I think a lot of people take away from that this idea that like, wow, like listen to this thing go, watch him drive. All I'm thinking is he's a tall dude
Yeah, he
and
was
he's
like-
sitting in the car like this.
He's like this.
And his arms
Yeah.
are like this and he's shifting over here. And I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is unbelievable. Like the driving position is the most cumbersome thing you can add to this car. And he's just really going for it. And
Yeah.
that
Oh, yeah.
to me, I'm like, oh, that's
a great
incredible.
video.
Because you know he didn't sit there and drive the car for 2 hours before that
No,
was
he's
shot.
just warmed up, boom.
And I'm like, oh baby, that's the stuff. That's
I
when
gotta
you're-
watch that one again. That was a
that's a great
legendary
video.
video.
That's
That was
good.
really good.
So before we finish up here, do you have like a favorite car moment, or do you have a favorite car that you drove that when you got out of it you were like, wow, like nothing is gonna top that?
I don't know if it's nothing's gonna top that, but I have moments where I'm like, this is why I love what I do. And Caterham 7.
Yes.
And that's even above an Ariel Atom 4 for me, like because the Ariel is too much. It's nuts. You come out like basically laughing, crying, and
Yeah.
and screaming all at the same time because you've just survived a thing. Whereas like the Caterham, I felt like I belted the car to me. I
Yes.
felt like I was the machine. It's so tacky, but like when I grew up, the stories that my dad would always read me are like Frog and Toad, right? And Toad had his little speedster buzzing around town, and I was fucking Toad. And I was like, and it's such an experience when you have like these little Ford Crossflow engines because they rev immediately.
Yes.
There's nothing between you.
And you can literally palm the ground.
Yes.
It's
And-
like, what?
and I was driving on these little back roads in Massachusetts and it's loud and I could see people like walking in the distance and then I'd shut it down a little bit and I was expecting them to yell at me and they were cheering for me.
I am Toad.
Because and if that was a Porsche, that was a
Yeah.
Porsche, if that was a
Oh,
Ferrari,
yeah, it's like-
I would
get
have
the-
been, get out of you rich prick. coming through in an open-wheeled British roadster. Like, oh my God. Oh,
They're so good.
I suddenly was like, I need this, and I need a leather helmet, and I need goggles, and I will just be that asshole for the rest of and it was great. And and it's not to belittle any other experience I've had behind the wheel of a car, but that one,
cool.
I felt like I was a car for a brief moment.
That's so
awesome.
Great way to put it.
That's awesome.
They're so good. One of our volunteers, John Oliva, let me drive it for about 10 minutes. And I got through second, third, and fourth. And it was like, oh my God, I'm going to have a heart attack. Like, it's so incredible. You cannot emphasize it enough. And that's up there. If that car is
road
up there.
legal go-kart.
Yeah, you have to like consciously prioritize safety, because you just get in a zone and you're like, this is great. Whereas like there's other cars where you're like, oh, this is a death trap. And so you're first and foremost is like, don't die. And that car, you're like, go.
I can corner a little quicker.
And then as you're like exiting the corner with a little bit of slip angle, you're like, oh, we're going to die if anything goes wrong. And you're like, dial it back. Like,
right.
Then 5 minutes later, you're doing it again.
Yeah. You forget it. Forget immediately. Yeah. So that to me, I think that to me just is like,
it's a great answer.
What I've got, it's the most like raw expression of
nice
vehicles. And I think it bridges the gap between like vintage vibes and new enough technology to get the thing on the road.
And nice.
If anything, I just want people to enjoy their cars and not be judgmental of other people's wants, desires, or whatever, but just don't be a loyalist. Try everything.
Yeah.
And we're so lucky that we get to do that. And I take for granted sometimes that we get this perspective on the automotive world that most people don't, because they're just like, well, I've always bought a Toyota, so I'll always buy a Toyota. And that's fine. But like, open it up.
Such a great mindset.
Yep.
Such a great mindset.
Well, that's good. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
This was a great conversation.
That was awesome.
We want to do some more stuff and have you drive some stuff in the spring. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, thanks, guys.
That was very animated. That was awesome.
That was good.
Tedward is so passionate.
Yeah, I love it. You are very passionate.
Get the fuck out of here. Yeah. I was like, whoa.
No, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for coming, man. Really appreciate it.
Seriously, this is great.
And remember to like, subscribe, comment, share, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks. That was awesome. Thank you.
Cool.
It's sandwich time, boys.
Yes.
Sammy's. Ooh.